Hello there, welcome to VLGA Connect, your weekly look at what's happening around the local government sector, mainly in Victoria, but sometimes we go a little further afield, and we will be doing that today, and we'll catch you up on some news in just a moment. It's all brought to you by our sponsors, Hunt and Hunt Lawyers. Let's look at what's on the show today. Tony Raunic from Hunt and Hunt will be here to catch us up on the Hepburn Shire Council private prosecution matter, as well as a related Supreme Court case. We'll also see if we can find out where the government's new local government bill is at in the process, and do some comparison to the opposition's alternative bill. And later, Mayor Dr Heather Holmes-Ross from the City of Mitcham in South Australia will be here. Heather is also the president of that state's local government association. She'll tell us how a 5-month delay in local council elections is impacting the sector. And I'll ask her about reports of a council CEO exodus and what might be driving that. That's all ahead on today's show. But now it's time for VLGA Connect News and a look at what's happening across Victorian local government this week. Councillor Nikki Cower has taken the oath of office at Kingston City Council as the newest Melaleuca Ward councillor, despite the VEC referring the by-election result to VCAT over suspected postal voting irregularities. Councillor Cower will serve pending further advice from VCAT and the VEC. Mayor Councillor Georgina Oxley congratulated Councillor Cower, saying the council will work closely with the VEC to ensure correct procedures are followed. The runner-up, Glenn Dumbrell, has voiced fierce outrage over the result in the media, demanding an immediate recount and insisting the vote should be voided. The VEC has also referred the matter to the local government inspectorate. Casey City Council has elected Councillor Michelle Crowther as its new mayor, stepping up from deputy mayor after Councillor Stephen Cooman resigned the mayoralty to focus on his campaign for state parliament. Councillor Crowther will serve out the current term, which expires in mid-November. Her elevation created a vacancy in the deputy mayoralty, immediately filled by Councillor Anthony Walter. Both of those elections were unanimous. At Latrobe City Council, a new councillor has been welcomed, Rob Moffat. This follows the Morwell River Ward by-election. Councillor Moffat took his oath of office last Friday after seeing off 4 other candidates in the postal ballot. Mayor Sharon Gibson congratulated the new councillor, who joins the 9-member council for the remainder of the term. So more Victorian councillors have confirmed they'll contest the upcoming state election, adding to a growing list of local government figures entering parliamentary contests. The latest to declare this week, Moonee Valley councillor and former AFL footballer John Barnes, Gannawarra Shire Mayor Garner Smith and Baw Shire Councillor Ben Lucas, all running as One Nation candidates. They join the now former Mayor of Casey, Stephen Cooman, the former Mayor of Bass Coast, Rochelle Halstead, current Greater Geelong Councillor Chris Burson, and Melbourne Deputy Lord Mayor Rashina Campbell. And there are, of course, others. That list is continuing to grow. At Baw, the CEO Tilla Booten released a statement this week confirming that Councillor Lucas intends to take a leave of absence to be tabled at a future council meeting and effective until the election is complete. It is now just under 100 days until Victorians go to the polls, with local government shaping up as a major election flashpoint. Early campaigning has already focused on housing, infrastructure and bin collection. Murrindindi and Strathbogie Shire Councils will share $1.15 million in joint Commonwealth state funding to extend Community Recovery Officer and Recovery Hub programs until June 2028. They're supporting residents still recovering from January's bushfires. But Strathbogie Council says it will get just $230,000 of that, and its share falls well short of what's needed. It says it needs $2.8 million for impacted communities, and it's still waiting to hear if the state will grant a request for 3 years of rates relief for bushfire-affected residents. That's been valued at $5.9 million. Burundara Council has unanimously voted to demand the state government scrap its planning fast-track scheme, criticising negotiations that it says let developers bypass local height limits. The move comes as the council pursues legal action against Planning Minister Sonia Kilkenny over approval of an 18-storey tower at Kew Junction. Maribyrnong Council has reaffirmed its position on the redevelopment of the former Footscray Hospital site, following release of Development Victoria's draft master plan. The Mayor, Mohammed Semra, welcomed alignment on housing and active transport, but says stronger community outcomes are needed. The council will keep advocating for more public open space, social infrastructure and better connectivity. And Wyndham City Council has issued a $2,035 fine to a driver caught on camera, seen here dumping cardboard boxes beside full public recycling bins instead of using alternative disposal options. Local laws officers identified the offender after CCTV captured the incident at 4 a.m. The council is reminding residents that leaving waste beside public bins is illegal dumping. And Campaspe Shire Council has appointed veteran local government executive Craig Neiman as interim chief executive officer. Mr. Neiman is formerly the CEO of City of Greater Bendigo, and he steps in following Pauline Gordon's departure to the City of Boroondara. He'll guide the organisation through recruitment and transition to a permanent CEO, drawing on his recent experience advising regional Victorian councils. That is our VLGA Connect News Roundup for this week. For more on those stories and more, listen to the Local Government News Roundup podcast, sponsored by the VLGA and available wherever you listen to podcasts. Let's bring Tony Raunic into this week's discussion because there's lots to catch up on. Tony, of course, from Hunt and Hunt Lawyers, our sponsors. Tony, good to see you.
You too, Chris. Good to see you.
How have you been?
Yeah, another busy week. September approaches.
Yeah,
Here
it's
we
getting
are.
away. It's getting away, and we're as I mentioned at the outset of the show, we're less than 100 days now to the state election, and I do want to talk about some issues that are arising from that in terms of local government. But can we try and wrap up what's happened in the Hepburn Shire Council issue? As has been widely reported, the private prosecutions were thrown out when the DPP came on the scene a couple of weeks ago, but it's not all over yet, Tony, I understand.
That's right. So, understandably, most of the attention was given to those private prosecutions in the magistrates' court because because of their unusual nature. It rarely occur. Excuse me. But alongside that, that particular proceeding was a separate Supreme Court proceeding brought by Mr. Penman against Hepburn Shire Council, but also against the then CEO, Mr. Thomas, the previous Mayor, Councillor Henderson, and a former statutory planning manager, Ms. Boyd.
Right.
And that was an application in the Supreme Court for a judicial review, Chris, of council decisions related to Mr. Penman and an interface with Mr. Penman on council. Now, it's not unusual, Chris, for us to see these applications for judicial review of council decisions, but it is unusual for individuals, a mayor, a CEO, a council staff member, to be named as a defendant. Now, that proceeding, that Supreme Court proceeding, was listed and had a hearing this week, Chris, and the Supreme Court struck out Mr. Penman's case. He has an ability to seek leave to have it reinstated within a limited period of time, but at least as things stand, as we record, that case too has been struck out. So it does seem that we're seeing, the chapters close on these long proceedings that Hepburn's been through.
Yeah, they have been long and drawn out, haven't they? So is that it? Notwithstanding what you just said about the ability for that to perhaps be revisited?
Well, there are still processes in place in relation to the magistrates' court proceeding in relation to seeking costs against the unsuccessful applicant here, Mr. Penman. And of course, if the Supreme Court proceedings are completed, then they're likely to be similar cost applications, one would think, by those other parties, council, those defendants, to seek to recover their costs from Mr. Penman as well.
So, given that there's been multiple parties involved, one unsuccessful party, I'm assuming that each of those parties have had to incur their own costs, and this could add up to quite a bit of money.
Look, I would say for each defendant, you are talking at least $100,000
Wow.
in costs. So
Okay.
we're talking, upwards of half a
Is that just
million
for the
dollars.
magistrates court, Tony,
No,
or
that would be
you're
for
adding
both
in? Yeah.
proceedings,
Yeah.
but but
Okay.
but I would say we're talking about a $500,000 in costs potentially. So really substantial numbers. Yeah.
And do courts ordinarily award all of those costs or a proportion of?
Generally, it's a proportion, and generally, look, as a rule of thumb, it's about two-thirds you typically get of your actual costs if the
Okay.
court orders costs. But the typical provision is costs follow the outcome. So the successful party is generally entitled to their costs, and the exception to that is tribunals like VCAT or code
Okay.
of conduct panels like councillors have.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So we'll keep an eye on that before that's all completely wrapped up. Now, this, of course, links to the new bill that's before Parliament and I think listed for next week. There's a question about retrospectivity. The bill that the government has introduced would not stop private prosecutions that have already been brought from proceedings, but we're not aware of any others that are in the pipeline, are we?
Well, we're not aware of any that have been filed in the court. We're certainly hearing about the prospect of them, and
Right.
that's why I think it makes sense for any legislative amendment to have a retrospective capacity to say, look, if a councillor is facing one of these private prosecutions, they're not automatically stood down. That ought
Mm.
to be in the bill. I think it's not currently in the Stronger Communities Bill, the one that the government has introduced to the House about 2 months ago. Um, Apparently, it's in the coalition's alternative bill called the Stability of Councils Bill. The
Right.
text hasn't been released, but we know that the Shadow Minister, Bev McArthur, has spoken on a number of occasions, including in the Parliament, about what will be in the coalition's alternate bill.
Yes, and on this program a couple of weeks ago, Bev McArthur was here and gave us some insights into
Mm.
what they'd like to see, particularly around the Fair Jobs Code. I think they pulled that out entirely in their bill. Reece Thomas did some excellent analysis
Mm.
on LinkedIn comparing the two bills. What stood out for you there in terms of those differences, Tony?
Yeah, yeah. I think the treatment of state election candidates.
Right.
So um, under the coalition bill, if you're a mayor or a deputy mayor and you announce your candidature, you won't have to step down from the mayoral deputy mayor role until you formally nominate as a candidate. So if you like, there's no different treatment for mayors and deputy mayors in the coalition's bill.
Hmm.
Um, there's also there's an absence of reference to model governance rules, and there's no mandatory reporting of conflicts of interest by CEOs. And there's been a mixed view on that. Some CEOs say it's an unfair imposition on them to be forced to do that. Others seem prepared to go down that path.
Yeah, well, it's vexed in many
Mm.
ways. That's perhaps a conversation for another time. The status, as you understand it, or the process from here, Tony, with these now two bills we believe coming before the Parliament.
Well, yeah, and clearly the ALP government have had other priorities over the last
Yeah,
2 months to change a
not
premier.
sure what they've been up to. I haven't heard anything much.
Yes, yeah. So the change of leader, the Royal
Yeah.
Commission
Oh, yes, that.
announcement,
Yeah. Oh,
and
and
those
that
sorts
too.
of things.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All of
So
that.
so so it was understood that this bill would have been dealt with by now, and I guess the can's been kicked down the road a little. It has been listed at times in the past for on the notice paper of the Legislative Assembly. It is again on the notice paper for this coming Tuesday, the 25th of August. So certainly the government have the numbers typically to get these bills passed,
Hmm.
and it's a question of what's their priority on the day in the Parliament. But one would think that they'll deal with this certainly before the Parliament to be prorogued, I think is the word, but
Yeah.
to close before the election.
They're running out of time, aren't they? As we
Mm.
said, less than 100 days. I'm not sure there's too many sitting days left, are there?
No,
No.
no, no. This is right, and it's of course puts the sector in a difficult position. But we also know that that there's a strong possibility that there could be a change of government in November anyway.
Mm.
So whether this, even if this bill passes, there's a likelihood that we'll see some changes if there's a change of government. And I think beyond what we've just talked about, Chris, I think we can talk perhaps about the the ethos, if you like, or the philosophy maybe of the coalition. We believe it's probably more. A bit more laissez-faire, if you like, in relation
Mm.
to the code of conduct, less prescriptive in relation to council codes of conduct, particularly in relation to this vexed issue of freedom of speech, if you like.
Hmm.
There's elements of the code of conduct for councillors at the moment that go to how you address groups in the community or issues that are of significance in the community, like Indigenous community. We've seen councillors accused of breaches of the code of conduct when they've spoken out publicly about, Australia Day and how that should be celebrated, their views on, a treaty with First Nation people, their views
Yeah.
on gender issues, those sorts of things. And I would think that the coalition will probably be take an attitude that is more promoting freedom of speech in that
Right.
regard.
Okay. Yeah. Ms. MacArthur did say she would be expecting councillors to act more like adults in those circumstances. What that would look like in a conduct regime remains to be seen. I think there's also some indication that they might be looking at what some other states have, Tony, and that is salary bands for CEOs. Am I right about that?
Yeah, yeah. So we've seen this in WA and South Australia, and what so currently in Victoria, as in New South Wales, it's up to the council what they pay their CEO. They certainly have to be public about that.
Yeah.
There's a transparency, um, but the proposition, I believe it's being considered by the coalition, is having prescribed salary bands for CEOs. So you might have, just like we have with mayors, for example, Chris, you might have, say, the City of Melbourne is in its own band, and obviously the CEO of the City of Melbourne would be getting paid more than any other council CEO. But then you might have large metropolitan CEOs in a particular band. Rural, regional in a different band, so that we're prescribing how much councils
Mm.
can pay their
Mm.
CEOs.
And I assume the remuneration tribunal would probably be charged with presiding over those decisions, which is what's happened in South Australia, Tony. And it just so happened, and there's some real issues playing out there at the moment. We just so happen to have a South Australian mayor on the program very shortly, Dr Heather Holmes-Ross, who's the mayor of Mitcham and the president of the LGA of South Australia, to talk about that and the fact that their elections have been postponed by nearly 6 months. We'll talk about the implications of that. So hang around for that. It's an interesting conversation. So there's some of the things that might be likely to happen with a change of government. Can we circle back to this election cycle? Because the bill, as I understand it, in terms of what it says about obligations on councillors running for state or federal office, or state office, I'm sorry, wouldn't come into effect until January 1. So not this time around. And we are seeing some different approaches playing out already, aren't we?
We certainly are. There are quite a number of councillors who have announced their candidacy. Some who, in fact, very publicly have stood on platforms in
Mm.
relation to their parties. So we've seen councillors who are, for example, mayors having stepped down from the mayoralty because they're known to be a candidate. In other cases, we have people who are still sitting in mayoral positions, but but are widely tipped to
Yeah,
be running, or
yeah,
indeed have even indicated that themselves in their public statements. So there's a difference of approach, and that is because, Chris, there's no legislation on this issue
yeah.
at the moment. There are various policies at a council
Guidelines. Yeah.
level, but they're
Mm,
not, yeah, guidelines, as you say, they're not enforceable. So
yeah,
councillors are able to actually act as councillors right up to the moment they get sworn into the
yeah,
parliament.
yeah.
Um, Typically, I think we're seeing councillors take leave of absence from the date they sign the nomination, but
Hmm.
that date is yet to occur, Chris. That's
That's some
somewhere.
way off yet, isn't it?
Mm,
So we've seen the Mayor of Casey just this week
mm,
hand over the mayoral chains or robe or whatever. We've seen some time ago the Mayor of Bass Coast do something
yes.
similar. We hear this week that Garner Smith, the Mayor of Gannawarra, is standing, but as yet I've seen no announcement about him having any intention to stand aside from the mayoralty. Um, you mentioned that the opposition's view would be that mayors and deputies wouldn't be treated any differently
Mm.
to other councillors. But surely, if you're running for state parliament with the office of mayor behind you, you've got an extra platform and an unfair advantage over others.
Yeah, yeah. I do think it also puts a mayor in a difficult position,
Yeah.
Chris, because there's going to be many moments where a mayor is on a platform speaking on behalf of the council, the principal spokesperson
Yeah.
for the council. And if it's known that that individual is also um, an intended candidate, it makes it very difficult for that mayor to, in a objective way, speak about something the state government has done or the federal government has done, indeed, if it's in relation to the federal candidacy. So I think my personal view is if I was a mayor and I was running, then I would step down because I think that it puts my council and indeed myself in a somewhat invidious position when I'm standing on a platform
Yeah.
speaking as the principal spokesperson of council about state government issues or how the state government's interfacing with my council, and I'm known to be someone who's seeking office
Yeah.
in that government.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point. And the list of councillors, not just mayors, running for these elections is growing. I'm not sure if it's more than we've seen in the past, but it feels like that's
Mm.
becoming a very big list. And I'm aware of potentially at least three more mayors that are believed to be planning a run that haven't announced any intentions yet. So it's going to be an interesting one to watch over the next few weeks.
Oh yeah, it's going to be a very interesting election night, Chris.
It
Big
is. It
implications
is.
this time round.
Yeah. Thank you, Tony. Always good to chat and lots to catch up on there. I'm sure there'll be more to talk about in the very near future. So I look forward to having you back on the program.
That'll be great, Chris. Thanks very much.
That's Tony Raunic from Hunt and Hunt Lawyers here on VLGA Connect this week. Local government in South Australia is entering some uncharted territory. Council elections that were due this November have been pushed back to April next year. That means sitting councillors and mayors will serve months longer than they signed up for. And at the same time, the sector's grappling with a wave of senior staff departures. About 17 CEOs in 18 months are moving on, and some say that's due to a new remuneration framework. Well, we'll have a look at both those stories today with my guest, Dr Heather Holmes-Ross, who is the Mayor of the City of Mitcham and President of the Local Government Association of South Australia. Heather, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much, Chris.
Lovely to have you here. Can you just set the scene on Mitcham for us? Where are you situated in South Australia? What's your community like?
So Mitcham is an inner metropolitan suburb of Adelaide. It's not inner, so there is one suburb, one council area between us and the City of Adelaide. City of Adelaide in the middle, of course, then the Parklands, then
Yes.
a ring of councils around the outside, and we're next. So we're 70,000 beautiful souls. We we go from the plains up into the foothills of Adelaide, so people
Right.
might know the names Mitcham, Belair, Blackwood, those types of areas.
Excellent.
We have 2 universities in our patch, 26 schools, all fabulous because you can't rate them. And
Yes. Yeah. And how long have you been mayor for?
8 years. So this is
Right.
they're coming to the end of my second term with a unexpected 5-month extension, as you alluded to.
Exactly. So let's talk about that. That's certainly got some attention beyond South Australia. You were expecting to go to polls across the state in November. I did see
Mhm.
some comments from, I think, the acting electoral commissioner saying they just weren't geared up to be able to run these elections properly. Did that
Mhm.
surprise you when those comments came out?
Yes and no. We have been advocating for quite some time to the state government to change the elections. At the moment, we have state elections in March and in the same November local government elections. And our last local government elections were less than perfect. We had quite a few issues with EXA, with the Electoral Commission. So
Yeah.
we've been advocating for quite a while to change the year, so to offset local government by a year from state government. So and of course that fell on deaf ears until the state government election didn't go as well as planned, and then suddenly
Right.
it became an issue. Oh, did I really say that? Yes, I did. So suddenly the state understood and decided that it would. Well, the electoral commissioner, as you alluded to, said that she didn't feel the acting commissioner said she didn't feel confident that she could carry out those elections. And so what we had asked for was a year extension
Right.
because having an election in April is very difficult in terms of our budget cycle. So we, like most councils, start our budget in about November
Yeah.
to be ready for June. And
Yeah.
it's a big process. All councils would understand that. And so now what we're faced with is a 7th of April election, which means we will have a brand new council coming in just 2 months before we have to make our rates decision. So quite tricky. So yes, no, I wasn't surprised because, or we weren't surprised because we knew that it wasn't that the Electoral Commission weren't coping. Yes, I was surprised because I felt like our calls were falling on deaf ears.
Yes. So that's interesting. As soon as you said that issue about budgeting, my mind's gone to, well, how are CEOs and mayors preparing for this? You're going to have potentially a whole raft of new councillors expected to
Mm.
make massive financially focused decisions in their first few weeks, effectively. How do you plan for that?
It is a huge issue, and I don't think that there's a silver bullet answer because the other thing, of course, we don't want is to be consulting on budgets during a campaign period, which would be an
Yeah.
absolute disaster. You really, really need to keep those things separate. I think what most administrations are doing is getting ready for, I might say, a business as usual type budget. So no big surprises, no, big capital works type things, and perhaps seeing this as just a run of the mill year. And then
Yeah.
because the next term is going to be an extended term, because what the state government has agreed is to separate from now on local government and state government elections. So we would have been going to the polls again in 2030, but that's been pushed out to 2031. So
Right.
we do have a longer term. Next,
And will it still be in the April area,
no,
Heather, or back
I
to November?
go back to November.
Right. That
So
makes
we've
more
got
sense.
a
Yeah.
5-month extension this time, and then the next term will be 7 months and 4 years.
Right.
Um,
Okay.
so, so this is kind of an odd interim blip year that we're going to
Mm,
go into. And so I think that's most administrations are just preparing, I think, to do something
yeah.
quite business as usual because it is very difficult to get councillors up to speed in a couple of months on what can be huge budgets.
Yeah.
depending on the size of the
So
council.
I guess people running for election next time know up front that they're going to have an extended term.
Yes,
Current councillors didn't know they were going to have another,
correct.
what is it, 5 or 6 months on the end of their current term. So how is that playing out in terms of fatigue, attrition? Are you seeing councillors say, all right, I can't hang around any longer, I'm going to move on now?
There's both. So we're
Right.
seeing some people that are overjoyed to have the extra time. It pushes our election into next year, which is it's a kind of mind game because it means that it's not this year. And while people were gearing up, it was like the whole year was almost lost to campaigning. Now it's being pushed to next year. We're seeing people settling so that
Right.
it's far calmer in chambers than it perhaps would have been if we were having the November election. There are some people that were just hanging on by their fingernails, just hanging in there till November for them, particularly in difficult chambers where there's been behavioural issues and things like that.
And there's been a few of
There
those I've noticed. Yeah.
some of them are
Yeah.
finding it, particularly mayors are finding it very, very difficult,
Yeah.
knowing that they'll have to stay with those chambers for additional 7 months. But
Yeah.
at the end of the day, local government, we're quite a resilient lot, and we do what we have to do and just get on with the job.
Yes, yes, you all have that in common across the country. I was just thinking also through that timing, it's going to be very difficult for the current group of councillors to make big decisions that bind an incoming council during that
Yes.
extra period, isn't it? So hence your comments about the administration looking to do a business as usual type approach. Are
Yeah.
you concerned that some won't sort of take that into account in their decision making?
Well, I mean, the administrations can do whatever they like, but at the end of the day, the financial decisions are made by councils.
Yeah.
And so councils could do or chambers could do whatever they want. And so
Mm.
while the administration might be planning for something nice and calm,
Yeah.
there's two scenarios. Either the current councils, yeah, chambers could
Mm.
spend up big
Yeah.
and not have the rates, so spend up in advance of rates being
That's
set.
that's sort of what I was getting
Um,
at. Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that could happen.
Yeah.
Or they could spend moderately, and we could have new chambers elected that say no,
Mm.
and push budgets into deficit. So if there's been some, well, either large or moderate spending, a
Mm.
new council might decide, for example, that they don't want any, depending on what they stand on, that they don't want any rate rises at all. In which case, yeah, there'll be council deficits,
Yeah.
budget deficits all over the place. So it's not pretty.
No, and I guess that could happen in any cycle, but in this case, it's that timing with the budgeting that brings an extra element to it, doesn't it?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
because usually you'll set your budget, there's a couple of months, and then you go into caretaker. So there's not
Yeah.
too much time to
Yes.
do damage. Whereas
Yeah,
this,
indeed, indeed. All right, I'm sure you'll be watching that very closely as the head of the peak body. Can I get to the other issue around CEO turnover? I've seen figures like 17 in 18 months, and some suggestions that this new remuneration framework might be behind some of those CEOs moving on because they're going to have to take a pay cut. Is that true, or is that a bit of a beat up?
Certainly, there are instances where it's true. We as a sector, to the Remuneration Tribunal having oversight as a way of not having rate capping. So this is one of
Right.
the agreements that the sector made 4 years ago. So there was two things that happened. We now have financial oversight by a SCOSA, so we have an independent body overlooking our budgets, and we also have the independent remuneration tribunal overlooking CEO salaries. What's been really interesting is the tribunal seem to have decided somewhere that their job is not only to oversee but also to reduce.
Right.
So they have initially what they did was just grouped the bands of similar councils and said, well, this is a range, but this is the range of salaries that these councils sit within, and you could argue that. It was a kind of self-stabilizing system because if residents thought they were paying their CEOs, their councils were paying their CEOs too much, they could just get rid of their councils. They could make that protest vote.
Yeah.
But with this regulation happening, what we've seen is they've created 8 remuneration bands, which is very odd because we have 5 council bands.
Right.
So
Yeah.
set by the same remuneration tribunal.
That's interesting. Yeah.
And the bands are very narrow. And the top level or the maximum of each band, it tends to be below what the maximum of was in that band.
Right.
So that's somewhere they've read into their remit that they need to reduce, which is really interesting because that wasn't, we didn't think, part of the deal.
Part of the plan. So what this practically means is some councils on contracts that are already sitting above that cap.
Yes, absolutely.
So practically, what is that going to mean for those CEOs? The suggestion is some have already moved on because they felt they were going to be taking a pay cut.
Yes.
And it's not grandfathered, am I right?
Only till yes, it's not grandfathered, and the tribunals say they don't have the capacity to grandfather, and that's why it's not. So they've set a date, which is December 27, and at that date, all CEOs must be sitting, according to the tribunal determination, within their appropriate band.
Okay.
The problem is that this is, of course, at odds with a contract, a legal contract that our CEOs might have, saying that they're to be paid above that band.
Yeah.
So
how do you see that being tested? Is there going to be some sort of legal process then, some sort of legislative review needed to iron out those issues?
Well, it's interesting because the tribunal has just done another determination, so they've just completed that. They added 4% for CPI to all of the bands, and then increased the maximum of each band by 4%, which is an interesting move, in part to address this issue. But I think what we'll see come December 2027 is individual CEOs, taking their councils to court, because both things are true.
Yeah, that's another really interesting one to be watching. And do you think, what do you say to the suggestion that the sector's losing a lot of knowledge and experience as a result of this with those CEO resignations?
Yeah, there has been quite a lot of movement. Some of it's between councils, and you expect that to happen. But some of it is leaving the sector, and I think that it is going to have an effect because in effect we're offering less, and particularly in the regions, it's hard enough already to attract good people to regional councils. And the smaller, the more difficult it is to attract, unless you happen to have someone that's brilliant and locally grown. So we are really worried about the calibre of people we'll have taking these roles, and then their capacity to cope with the demands of being a CEO, which are huge in any council, but it can be very lonely, in particular in a smaller regional council.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I did see some media coverage, and one thing you share with Victoria and other parts of the country is lazy comparisons of council CEOs' salaries to the Premier of the state, which just makes me so angry. And I saw some comments from you that were very similar.
Yes, I was very lucky to have the opportunity to say on radio, you're not comparing apples with apples.
Correct.
If you want to talk about CEOs, you need to be comparing them to the heads of state departments. And when you do that comparison, you'll find that our CEOs are very modestly paid in comparison. So
indeed, and for the complexity and the range of the work that they're expected to sit above. But I'm a bit biased being a former council CEO. But thank you for also supporting that view. We'd love to see some more balanced coverage of these issues, wouldn't we?
Absolutely. So we will see what happens.
Heather, it's been a delight to talk to you. Are you prepared to say if you're running again and in April?
Absolutely, I am. Yes. No, this is best job ever. I love it. So I will be there for hopefully a 4-year, 7-month term. That's
excellent.
Good
luck to
and my
you.
goal.
We'll watch with interest. Thank you for coming on VLGA Connect.
Absolute pleasure, Chris. Thank you for having me.
Dr Heather Holmes-Ross, the Mayor of the City of Mitcham and President of the LGA of South Australia, with us on today's program. Now, before we leave you this week, a reminder that bookings are open for the VLGA's 2026 Mayoral Leadership Program, providing mayors and deputy mayors with targeted knowledge to fulfil their roles with a high degree of competency. It's directly aligned with the mandatory regulatory requirements outlined by the Victorian Government in their governance and integrity regulations, which were introduced in October 2024. The program will equip mayors and deputies to lead their council, as well as to satisfy the legislative requirements to undertake induction training within 1 month of the election to the role. Now, of course, mayoral elections for many councils won't be finalised until mid-November, but you can register your place under your governance manager or mayor and councillor's office to secure the early bird prices. If you'd like to find out more, head to the VLGA website and make sure you secure your places. Places are limited in that program. That's our VLGA Connect show for this week. Thank you for watching and listening wherever you are, and I hope you'll come back next week when we'll have more for you here on VLGA Connect, sponsored by Hunt and Hunt Lawyers. Until then, bye for now.